Hello, I'm Chuck Wolf, Chief Executive for Charles J. Wolf Associates, LLC. As a motivational speaker and a leadership consultant and executive coach and trainer, I often work with very successful people in their companies. Since many can't afford a professional, I volunteer to host a radio talk show called The Emotion Roadmap, Take the Wheel and Control How You Feel, on a nonprofit community radio station in Bridgeport, Connecticut, WPKN. My reason for doing the show is to share with as many people as possible this wonderful process for helping people manage their own emotions and their relationships with others. My goal is for everyone listening to learn to use the Emotion Roadmap to make life better. As you listen to me, help others, I hope you are also learning. As a Simsbury resident, I'm delighted to be able to make the show available through Simsbury TV. To learn more, go to my website, www.emotionroadmap.com. Thank you for listening and watching.
Hi, this is Chuck Wolf, and this is the Emotion Roadmap, Take the Wheel and Control How You Feel. And this is a radio show on WPKN 89.5 FM, listener-supported radio, broadcasting from Bridgeport, Connecticut. And we are broadcasting the day of Veterans Day, a day where we celebrate all the hard work, the dedicated service, all the heroes that have done what they could to protect our freedom in our country. And we want to say thank you to all of those service people out there who have done what so many of us appreciate and are grateful for. Thank you for your service. Let me just say how much I appreciate, and all the people I know appreciate, what went into your sacrifice in being able to serve our country in an incredible way, to do what you could to protect all the liberties and freedom we enjoy as Americans. So thank you for that. I also want to recognize that we are in a process where we are understanding what's happened with the elections that all the veterans have fought so hard to protect, that we value our democracy and the outcome of our elections and the peaceful transfer of power is really incredibly important as we go forward. If you are having a hard time accepting the results because the results didn't turn out the way you wanted, whether you're Democrat, Republican, Independent, Libertarian, whatever label you might place on yourself, or you just see yourself as an American and you're, for whatever reason, disappointed in how things turned out, I encourage you to listen to the show that I had on last week. You can see it by going to YouTube and simply saying Emotion Roadmap, Election Aftermath, and it will bring you to my program. In that program last week, I talked a little bit about this idea that we have choices in front of us. Civil discourse is the hoped-for choice, in my mind at least. Civil disobedience, protest, peaceful protest against what we believe is wrong in our country, and civil war, where we just don't accept at all the outcome. And I think all of the choices that are available to us, I've labeled as starting with civil. And civil discourse is our best choice because it simply means we are talking and listening to understand, not necessarily to change other people's minds, because I think it's pretty hard to change someone else's mind. But when you show an appreciation of another person's perspective that's different than your own, you provide them with a gift of active listening, reflective listening, listening to them for their tone, their feelings, their emotions, and their perspective. And trying to understand why this person who you care about, or at least you're with at the moment, has such a different opinion than perhaps the one you hold so strongly and passionately yourself. So if you're struggling, especially with family members or friends, I encourage you to listen. Again, the show is on YouTube. And if you just go into Google, I tried this morning, and type in Emotion Roadmap and Election Aftermath, you'll get to the video show that I produced for my radio show. I've been doing my radio shows from my home rather than in the studio since the COVID pandemic started in March. So these shows are shows where I no longer take phone calls, which is unfortunate because if you're a regular listener to the show, and I've been doing it for 11 years now, you know that the show is about helping people deal with emotional challenges, trying to help people who are struggling with situations in their life, which may be at work, maybe at home, maybe in their communities, neighborhoods, in groups that they belong to, wherever it is that someone is having a challenge and it involves strong emotions. I found when smart people are stuck, when they're uncertain how to proceed, when they're worried about escalation, and yet they need to do something, and they're really unsure what it is they should do, that if it has strong emotional content, then by focusing on the emotions that are present, by looking at what it is that the person who calls is currently feeling, and if they're working with someone else or involved with someone else in whatever it is that's going on, that the other person or people are key to the situation that they're struggling with, that they worry too about how the other people or person is feeling. And I asked them to think about what are the current feelings and what would be ideal to feel. Because sometimes our feelings, while always informative and always important to recognize and to think about and to understand, they're not always helpful. Our current feelings aren't always helpful. And so I find when smart people are stuck, really good critical thinkers are stuck, it's often because something has to do with an emotion that they're experiencing that they really don't know how to deal with. So if I ask a caller to tell me about what it is they're feeling, and I hear them and I understand them and I reflect back to them what the feeling is that they're currently experiencing, and then I ask them to think about if you could make magic happen and ask yourself, what would be ideal to feel? What do you think that ideal feeling would be? What would you want for yourself? And if, again, there are key people associated with what you're dealing with, what is it that he or she or they are feeling? And what would be ideal for him or her or them to feel? Because when you look at a gap between what is ideal to feel and what you are currently feeling, that's the beginning of trying to understand how to create options that aren't available to you any other way than when you think about the emotions that are in play. And so, for example, the one I like to use that's really simple to understand, I think, is if you want to be confident in a situation and you're feeling anxious. How do you get from anxious to confident? How do you do it? So the show is about helping people who call in typically, but because of the virus and the pandemic we've experienced over these months, seems like even longer than months, doesn't it, sometimes? But this pandemic that's been with us for a time and will continue to be with us for a time, it seems. I want you to think about emotionally how you are feeling and how you want to feel and what would be ideal to feel, and to try and create strategies that actually help to support that, help to support the changes you want to make from the current feelings that aren't helpful to feelings that would be ideal. How do you do that? And I have ways that help people to do that. I'm going to be sharing a little later in this, in today's show, the work that I did with 3 clients who have come to me over the summertime and into the fall, who have worked with me over many weeks to learn how to use this emotion roadmap, to take a deep dive into both the science and the art. The science is about the new science that emerged about 25 years ago called emotional intelligence. There's real science associated with it. And I think if you are truly interested in knowing more about the science and you are comfortable reading journal articles, I would look up the work of Peter Salovey and Jack Mayer, and also David Caruso, because those are the pioneers that created the Mayer-Salovey-Caruso emotional intelligence test that actually tests people for emotional abilities. Now, there's a lot of information about emotional intelligence on the internet. in books, as well as on social media. And one of the, well, social media is the internet, I guess, but also in newspapers and magazines and so forth. And yet it's pretty complicated and somewhat confused in terms of the field. But there is one true scientific endeavor, I believe, that was this Mayer Salovey first discovered this idea that there are emotional abilities. And like math abilities, or verbal abilities, or spatial abilities, we're not all equal. Some of you, for instance, are really good at mathematics, good at calculus, trigonometry, algebra, geometry. And some of the rest of us are okay with some of those things, but not great. Some of us are basically just okay with math, in addition and subtraction, and division and multiplication. And so there's a range of abilities in mathematics, as an example. And that's true about emotional abilities. What these authors discovered was the abilities are based on our ability to identify emotions in others and in ourselves, the ability to use emotions. Use emotions is a complicated, it's a complicated competency or ability in this sense. When we are experiencing emotions, which we always are, by the way, we're always experiencing some emotion, but unless we're really having an intense emotional experience, we're not often thinking about what we're feeling. Think about that for a moment. Just allow yourself to think about, what are you feeling right this moment? Were you thinking about how you were feeling? Chances are you weren't. But you are now because I've called your attention to it. Well, the emotion roadmap, in some ways, is about calling your attention to what you are feeling and what might be better to feel. So the authors, again, Mayer and Salovey, discovered that identify emotions. What is it another person is feeling? Think about that one. What if you think you know what another person is feeling, but if you find out by taking this test that you don't accurately perceive what others feel, in fact, you're really low in that ability, but you don't know you're low, there's some pretty severe consequences for thinking that somebody's feeling a certain way when they aren't. The use of emotions, again, is when the emotions you're feeling drive your thoughts, and those thoughts often lead to behaviors. Now, again, if we don't really know or think about what we're feeling, we're just having thoughts and we're just behaving in certain ways. I like to use this example. If you've ever texted or seen someone text when they're driving, there isn't a person I know that would say that's a sane behavior, but people do it. People you probably know do it. You may have done it yourself. Why would anyone do something like that? Of course, the answer is there's no rational reason. It's an emotional, impulsive behavior that somehow we think it's critical to get this done now. And we know that's not a rational thought. Now, I'm not saying there isn't an emergency situation when a text might be critical in someone's life. Truthfully, the probability is very low that any texting needs to happen while you're driving, because you put yourself and everybody else who's anywhere near you in danger when you do that. And we all know that. And yet people still do it. So sometimes our feelings drive our thoughts and our behaviors that really are irrational in some ways. So the more we can focus on the use of emotion, this idea of our feelings drive our thoughts, drive our behaviors, and get better at that particular ability, the more in control we are of our own emotions. And also, the better our ability to understand how we want to influence what another person is feeling. The third ability is understanding how emotions work. For instance, if you're in a situation with someone where you have basically understood that that person is having a hard time coping in a particular situation, and you've thought about the situation and you can understand why they're having a hard time coping, if you understand how emotions work, you can think about what do they need to experience, think about, and feel in order to cope better. That's the understanding part of the science. The managing, which is the fourth ability. So there's identify, use, understand, and the fourth ability, and the last ability is managing our own emotions and our relationships, our emotional relationships with others. That's a really critical piece too. So I'm about to show you what I believe is really important about what people can learn about the emotion roadmap through emotional intelligence and what people have learned with me during the time that I've worked with them. And so I want to thank you for listening to the show. And I'm going to play for you a video where I've talked to 3 different individuals who have worked with me to share with you what they've learned about emotional intelligence and how it's benefited them directly. So this is about emotional intelligence, real people, real stories, real benefits. Thank you. Hi, I'm Chuck Wolf, and I've been privileged to lead many different groups of people through learning about their own emotional abilities, about emotional intelligence. I've created something called the Emotion Roadmap, which is a tool to help people to navigate their own emotions. There's a lot of white water out there around our emotions, and sometimes it's helpful to have some tools to navigate. And I've tried to teach people about that, and I had a really enjoyable group of people to work with this past summer. And you'll see them on the screen. I'll ask them to introduce themselves in a minute and tell you about themselves. But I also wanted to encourage everybody who's listening or who gets to see this to really learn more about emotional intelligence, because it can make a difference, a meaningful, positive difference in your lives. And I thought it'd be useful to have the 3 women on this program with me today share a little bit about themselves and why it's been important to them, hopefully as an inspiration to all of you listening, to see if you can take the time to invest in yourselves, because it's the best investment you can make, I think, in learning more about how you manage your own emotions, generate more inner peace for yourself, learn to be more calm. Certainly in these times of uncertainty, it's even more important perhaps than in what we might consider more normal times. But at the same time, I also want you to think about how you might help others and how you might influence others to also benefit from what they can learn about emotional intelligence. And this emotion roadmap, I'll explain, is simply a set of questions, which is when you're stuck, when you're dealing with uncertainty, when you're not quite clear about what decision to make or how to decide, or whether or not to have that tough conversation with somebody that you feel like you need to have but not sure how to have. All of that is based a lot around the struggles you have with your own emotions and your concern about the emotions of others. So my roadmap basically is about asking yourself, how are you feeling? How do you feel? And if what you're feeling isn't helpful to what you're trying to achieve, then asking, what would be more ideal to feel? And this isn't just for you. It's also if you're dealing with someone else, how is the person or people that are key to what you're trying to get done? How is he or she or they feeling? And what would be ideal for them as well as you to feel? And then how do you get there? That's the idea of a roadmap. How do you get from feeling very anxious to very confident, as an example? And then as you consider all the different strategies about how you do that, trying to determine what strategy is really workable, is possible, is something you can accomplish. And the way I achieve that is by asking you to think about the strategies you've thought about. How do you get from one feeling to a more ideal feeling? By asking yourself, is it something you can really do? Is the strategy something that you're capable of doing? And are you willing to do it? 2 very different questions. So that's essentially the roadmap. And now I'd like to take time. I guess I'll start with you, Marie, and ask you to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your personal and professional background. And then I'll ask you a couple of questions. And then we'll go to Corinne, and then we'll go to Elizabeth. Is that okay?
Okay, thanks, Chuck. Well, my name is Marie-Christine. I am a full-time lecturer at HEC Montreal in organizational behavior. So I teach courses like emotional intelligence, management skills, career management. And on the side, I do some coaching trainings. I help people to develop their soft skills. So, for example, their leadership, stress management, how to delegate, conflict management, etc. So this is me. Do you want me to say more, Chuck?
Well, yeah, if you could talk a little, I know you're obviously, steeped in this field. So can you talk a little bit about why you think emotional intelligence is important today and in the future from your perspective, Marie?
Sure. I think more than ever, we need emotional intelligence. We are in our 4th industrial revolution with the AI. Everything is going so fast. We have to adapt a lot. And I'm thinking about people that has to adapt at work, having developed new skills, and they have to be good parents. They have to be good friends. They're trying to do their best everywhere, and time is so precious. And with everything going so fast, we have to use a lot of self-control to be able to take good decisions, but we don't have enough energy sometimes to take the right decision, to take a step back. So I think emotional intelligence is going to be really helpful to take that step back and take the time to say, well, what's more important for me, to choose their priority, and maybe take the good behaviors, the more efficient behavior, to ensure health, quality relationship, and to be more efficient. And it's a really good tool because we have to take that step back that we don't often use enough, I think, because everything is going so fast. So this is a great tool to help ourselves out.
So could you share a couple, either one or two personal or professional examples of how you've used it over the time we've been working together?
Sure. We worked together, and it's really helped me out to talk with Corinne, Elizabeth, Emily, with you, Chuck, especially with you, Chuck. And I think my main theme in the last year was how to be able to help people more efficiently, because I'm like a little Google button. When people are needing help, having questions, they're spontaneously coming to me and asking for help. And I was feeling proud. I said, well, I'm helping people. This is the meaning of my work. But it was getting too much. And I was getting annoyed. I was feeling irritated because I was feeling overload. I had too much work. And each morning I had emails and said, well, what's next? What they're going to ask me again? The people were calling me, and I was asking myself, now what? So that wasn't me. I said, well, I'm feeling annoyed. I'm feeling irritated. And you guys really helped me out to just assess that emotion and say, well, I don't want to feel like that anymore. So how do I want it to feel? I wanted to feel compassion. I wanted to feel empathy. I wanted to feel proud again of helping people out. But what I realized with the work we did together is that I wasn't helping as much as I could, because I was helping them, answering their question, they were getting more and more dependent of me. That is not what I wanted. My goal was to making them more independent. And I wanted them to feel confident that they could find their answers on their own. So you guys helped me out to say, well, how can I do that? How can I first feel less irritated, because I didn't want to feel compassion. I was annoyed. Mm-hmm. And so I had to manage that at first. And after that, I said, well, how can I tell them politely that they can manage these things on their own? So emotional intelligence really helped me with that. At first, I had to give myself more energy. So I had to take care of my health, to sleep well, to eat well, just take that step back, to have the energy to not feel annoyed. So this was more on the physical side, but in the mental side, I had to remember what was the meaning of my work, because I really love what I do. I'm passionate about my work. I like to help people out. So I had to remember myself why I did that job at first. So this gave me positive emotion. This gave me, again, proud, compassion, the willing to help. And after that, I went to speak with the different people, formally, informally, and I had a promotion. So I had to inform them that I wasn't be able to help as much as I could before. So I managed their expectancies, and they understood. And each time now they're writing me or asking me for help, well, I don't answer right away unless it's urgent. I give them some time to find their answer on their own. Or sometimes I just answer by saying where they could find the information. Mm. So this is helping them out. And I would say it's a work in progress, because I always have the reflex to answer right away, and I want to help. I said, no, you're not truly helping. It's just a short-term help. It's a patch. Oh, now great. You have to help them more. So I had to restrain myself from helping in the first reflex. So it's a work in progress, but right away I see I have less email. People are less asking me for help for things they could find on their own. So it's working. And I'm really glad for that because I have more space to work on things on my plate and more time for myself too.
So you talked about a number of things. One was that you had some history with people coming to you in sort of a previous job title or description. You had other responsibilities, and then when you shifted responsibilities in a promotion, people were still coming and asking those questions, and so you were fighting with yourself about, I want to be helpful, but now I've got this other work to do, and on top of that, this work, and plus I'm not really helpful if I'm telling them how to do something instead of teaching them how to find answers for themselves. And that sort of, and part of that came, I think the nice thing about that is it came by looking at how do you want to feel.
Yeah.
It showed up as we walked through the roadmap about how you were feeling, how do you want to feel, and then we talked about all the different things that would make you feel the more ideal feelings, and now you're in the process of executing. That's kind of perfect. Thank you. Can you think of ways others who have different challenges might also benefit from this? Organizations, individuals, teams. Any thoughts that you have about how others might benefit from this?
Actually, you said it, Chuck. The great thing about the roadmap that really helped me out is just take the step back and say, how do I want to feel? Well, at first, how do I feel? But the main key for me, really the insight was, how do I want to feel and how I want others to feel. So this was really something that really helped me out because I was staying in the emotion that wasn't useful. And I said, well, I have the control. I can change. I can manage my emotion. It's going to take work, but I can do it. And when you're able, I think personally, when you're able to manage your emotion, you have more space to be open to empathy and help people out. So I think for everybody, they want to be good managers, or they're going to be good friends, they're going to be good parents. First step is to take care of yourself and identify your emotion and manage them. And you'll have more psychological space to be open for the others and to be able to understand them from new angles instead of being defensive.
That's great. And I know you're also a coach, along with being a professor. You're doing coaching. And have you had a chance to use this with anyone you're coaching yet? I don't know that you have yet, but has that happened yet for you?
No, I did it informally. So I tried the thing out with my friends and it worked. My friends are like, how do you say that? Cobaye? I don't know how to say it in English. I'm testing for now, unofficially.
Okay, so right now you're testing with some of your friends about how to help them. Okay, great. Thank you so much. And I'm going to then move on to Corinne. Thank you, Marie. That was great. Corinne, you want to tell us a little bit about who you are and your background personally and professionally?
Yes, hi. So I'm Corinne Prost. I'm also an organizational behavior lecturer in the business school of University of Montreal, HEC. And so I teach emotional intelligence in the second cycle. I teach team management at the MBA program. And I have, since 2008, I started my own consulting firm. And I've been helping individual and teams at team level improving their soft skills.
So one of the things that the way you and I met, Corinne, was you were one of the sponsors for me coming up to HCC to give a talk. And so your organization already was valuing emotional intelligence because you thought enough to have a speaker come up and talk about emotional intelligence. We hadn't met before that. But in terms of what you were thinking and what you now know about emotional intelligence, why do you think it might be important today and in the future? What's your perspective on it?
Well, one of my passion right now is about everything towards collective intelligence. We hear a lot about, volatile uncertainty in organization, with technology, like a high-speed decision process that the managers have to go through. And a thing that I'm very interested by is that how can we help organization, team, and individuals navigate towards that very complex environment. And a lot of organizations are saying we have to collaborate more. We have to be better at, innovate together. And at the same time, we're facing silos in organizations. So for me, emotional intelligence is a very a good path to help individuals. Marie was talking before about, defense mechanism. It's a very good path to help people step back and think about their, behaviors. Are they efficient or are they counterproductive without being, we have having bad intentions. Sometimes we just react in a bad way in a special situation. And the more complex is the situation, the higher chance it's going to be that we might, express a kind of counterproductive behavior. So that's one of the main reason I was very interested by emotional intelligence and supporting you, Chuck. And I was fascinated. I read about your, emotion roadmap, and I was like, I'm so curious to see how he applies it. And I have to say, I've been using it since April, since I've been certified with you, and it has been amazing. Like, I've been helping a few clients, and that's impressive of how quickly we can, go through the main blocker, if I may, in their decision process. So I'm very impressed with this tool.
So you've been using it with client work. I know that you've done that. And your experience is you do a lot of coaching currently. You're actually actively involved. And so you found it. Have clients been able to move more quickly through their emotions or manage their emotions in ways that have actually been helped by you by walking them through these steps then?
Absolutely. We like at school, as I always say, like we're assessed in the educational system. We're like always assessed, and we don't learn to pay attention to how we feel, to the emotions we have. And I think with this tool, Chuck, it gives like a very simple, a way, like Marie was talking about, taking the time to step back, but saying it's not that easy for people to say, step back for what? So with those 4 very simple questions, I have to say, like in the summer, I had a call from a client who say, well, I've been referred to one of your students that you had like 3 years ago, and I just give a chance and I'm calling you. I say, yeah, how can I help you? And he say, well, here's the situation. I've been working in an organization for the last 4 years. It's a subsidiary of a European company, and now we're like 4 employees who decided to go on our own to start our own business firm. Consulting services. So I'm like, okay, very good. And so the person started to talk to me and say, well, right now, we're very advanced in the process. We're actually 2 weeks before signing, doing the official signing with the bank and everything. And I don't feel good. I say, why are you not feeling good? Why? What's going on? And he started to say, well, one of the partner, he's a good friend of mine, and but at the same time, he's a colleague. And I have to say, through that process, I had a lot of doubt about, going through with him in that journey, doing business with him. Like, I'm not sure about the whole situation. And then I started to say, okay, so tell me about the context. Tell me about who is involved. How are they feeling? How are you feeling? And then your first question in the, emotion roadmap. So he started to take the time to talk about how he was feeling. And then he started to realize, say, yeah, I'm scared. That's why I'm calling you. I'm scared about this whole journey that I'm about to take on, and I'm not sure at all. And then I say, okay, so how do you think the other people are feeling? So then he took the time to describe and give some elements of the context that he wasn't paying attention to that much. It was there, but it wasn't there in his mind. It wasn't explicit. He wasn't aware of that much. And then I say, okay, so fine. So right now you're calling me. So ideally, what are you expecting from the whole thing? What would be the ideal, situation in everything you just described to me? Say, well, that's why I'm calling you. I'm like, okay, so you're calling me. So let's explore, like, how do you want to feel? I say, well, I'm excited about that business idea, because it's really obvious that we can go on, like we have clients. It's obvious that it's going to work. But at the same time, I might not go through the whole thing because I'm not sure if I should sign. Right. I say, okay, so my understanding is that the main actor in this situation is your colleague and friend. And so let's explore that. So how do you want him to feel? He said, well, I always say to him that the most important thing is our personal relationship. It's more important than our professional relationship. But he said, right now with this situation of getting in business, like we're putting money, energy, and it's hard to have that conversation with him. I say, so my understanding is that maybe you want to have that conversation, but you're scared about having that conversation. So ideally, you would like to feel confident about having a good, true, authentic conversation with him as a friend. So, well, actually, I think so. I think it will be the ideal thing if I can, but I'm worried that he might be upset because he already has a lot of anger. So I say, you see, there's a lot of emotions going on. That's what we're talking about right now. So he ended up, agreeing that he needed, ideally, he needed to be more confident and needed to have that conversation with his friend. So then I say, do you remember? So your third question, how can we create the feeling we want for each key person? So I say, do you remember any situation where, you had like a good experience with him, that you had a good conversation? And then, so that's what happened. I say, well, we're gonna talk about, how can we can be in business without having this, uncertainty in our decision. And then, so that's pretty much what happened, is that he decided that he would talk and say that the relationship was more important than the professional situation. And he was committing to that, getting into this partnership. But at the same time, he was worried about, his, anger and how he was feeling about, getting involved in that partnership. And that he really say, the only way, I will go forward is that I want to make it clear that you don't feel that there's, injustice in the way, we're going to have our role involved in this partnership. And it's important for me that you understand that we are friends, most important. But I'm worried right now that it might not be the best situation for you. Like, I feel you're committed, but I feel like with your anger and everything, I'm not sure that this is what you're looking for. There's something going on in your mind. And as a friend, I don't have the answer, but as a friend, I think we can trust each other. And you really have to wonder if it's going in a partnership, all of us, is it the right thing you're looking for? And then he ended up, realizing that, yes, he wasn't ready to commit his personal money for this consulting firm. So he said, you know what, maybe you're right, I should step back. And so that's what happened. He stepped back and he called me like a few weeks after and say, I had that tough conversation, but I was very confident and calm the way I exposed the situation. And, we make the decision. So I'm going forward with the other partners, and he's going out of the, he's going to be involved in this business. He's going to do on his own.
That's great. That's a great story. One of the things that struck me was because I don't always mention this, but when I'm using the roadmap, I teach this, but I don't always use it. But you did in this instance, where when you got to the place where he was scared about having the conversation, you asked him, have you had other conversations that weren't so easy maybe, but that they went really well with this person? And what were some of the elements of what made them go well? And I think that it helps people, because if they are scared about doing something and yet they have some history where what they're afraid of, they actually navigated successfully in the past somehow, maybe not even with the same person, but in this case, it was with the same person. What are the elements that made it work then? And then by asking that question, people start to feel like, wait a second,
instead of being scared, maybe I need to focus on how success actually happened in the past and other elements from that other conversation, which was quite different probably, but still had similar feelings involved. And it worked out with this person. And somehow all that came together in the way that it needed to for him to have that tough conversation. And it sounds like you probably saved them both a lot of heartache, not just the person who called you, but the other person. Sounds like he was really he was more scared maybe than his friend about joining the business, and it was showing up as anger.
Absolutely. Yes.
So that's a really excellent story. And I think so you've told us about how things are working that way. Was there anything else you wanted to say about emotional intelligence and the emotion roadmap and how it has worked for you?
Well, I think it's an amazing tool in a way that, like if I think of that client and I was like, how am I going to help him? And then, I'm like, because I have plenty of tools and I'm like, well, I'm going to use it. I'm going to use that, emotion roadmap. And it works so well. Like I had to say, like in 2 hours conversation, and I was able to, to help him making his decision. And he called me after and he said, thank you, Corinne. Like I couldn't believe how easy it became for me to make that decision, to have that real difficult conversation. This was the biggest thing. But last night I was teaching at the MBA program, and the students, there's a lot of engineers, and they were saying, well, Corinne, we're getting it, like, collective intelligence, being smarter to collaborate and everything. But how do we make that? Like, how do we help people being more smarter about all that stuff? And again, I'm like, it's about, being aware of the choice you have in how you act with others, how you interact with others. And that's where the emotion roadmap with the 4 questions are so easy to access to anybody. You don't have to be a PhD or a master degree to be able to, use it and find it helpful in your decision.
No, that's great. Thank you. Thank you very much, Corinne. So let's move to Elizabeth then. Elizabeth, do you want to tell us a bit about you?
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, so my name's Elizabeth. I grew up in a military family. I lived in Great Britain in my formative years, and then in several different states in the US from 1960 forward. I did the usual things. I got married. I had high ideals. That was in the 70s. I had a bumpy ride in that marriage and finally went for counseling in the 90s to fix the spouse, right? And I found out I was half the problem. In that learning adventure, I became aware of how childhood trauma can interrupt many current and future emotional and educational endeavors in complex ways. Luckily, I also learned how to act versus react. I got divorced. I continued my career in management and government service. And then I became the boss of my ex-husband. Well, that was dissonant. So I was not interested in that. I applied for a job in Texas, and I was offered a position overseeing a staff of 600. My employment background with a focus on people skills and other training helped. So did kindness, giving others the benefit of the doubt, and listening to and accepting people wherever they were. Toward the end of my career in Texas, I started getting ill. And eventually I became so ill I couldn't think. After 5 years of poor treatment from an oncologist, friends convinced me to get a second opinion. Good thing, in May of 2011, I found out I was about 2 months from pushing flowers from the wrong side with end-stage leukemia if left untreated. It was quite a journey after that, with many months and years being housebound due to illness, other than brief periods of respite.
So that's your background, and you are someone that you and I got to know each other through some work with an organization called No Labels. And what I have found in my work is that at least in terms of one of my very best friends, who also was diagnosed with 2 forms of cancer several years ago, he had discovered that this idea of emotional intelligence and some of the tools, including the emotion roadmap that he learned about, were really important to him to get through some very dark nights and times when he was really struggling. And he found it actually was helpful to him in trying to recover. And he's in a much better place today. And when I'd heard that and I had met you, I wondered if you might benefit at all from maybe coming and being a part of this work that we do together, and whether that might be useful to you. And so our journey began probably sometime this year. And your experience then is you've always known about people skills in terms of what you told us about yourself. And you have a background in relationship management, and you went through counseling, and you told us about how you learned about the role of past traumas and other influences on your emotions. And so as you think about all of that, plus what you've learned over the summer, what do you think is the future of emotional intelligence from your perspective? Why is it important today and in the future in terms of what you think about, Elizabeth?
Well, let me talk a little bit about it from my perspective. So Chuck, like you indicated, I first learned about emotional intelligence from you during the COVID pandemic. That's a heck of a time to learn about this stuff. Good, actually. You briefly introduced the concept, but I was on autopilot. In my brain, I was convinced I was highly emotionally intelligent and didn't need it. I was adept at acting instead of reacting. Yeah, check that block. And in my interpersonal relationships, things were going fine. Never mind the fact that remnants of PTSD started raging again with this pandemic. Never mind that sleep had become erratic and evasive. Never mind that established bedtimes were elusive as I stayed up later and later to read the current news, all to subconsciously assure myself I would be safe. I finally admitted it would not be helpful nor healthy to sleep in 1 hour increments. For the first time in a very long time, I became concerned I wasn't coping well. Enter Chuck and the Emotional Intelligence Roadmap. You introduced a concept of getting in touch with feelings and actually managing them. New concept for me. Feelings? Not me. I'm a see the hill, take the hill kind of person. Feelings only complicate the matter. It's something you talked about, yet began to permeate the gray matter. Feelings, huh? Perhaps this is something to look at. So I did, and am eternally grateful for this and to you. What I learned about emotional intelligence is it is far more than how we act. It's about how we feel, our self-talk. I learned there is a way to manage the self-talk to get what I want out of life, to manage my feelings, to come to terms that feelings are not only okay, they are tremendously important on our journey with self, today and for our future. I learned without the feelings conversation, my future did not have a concrete roadmap. Getting in touch with my feelings and managing them created my map to my new dreams and goals, even at the age of 69.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm glad it's made some difference for you, and in a very personal way. And as I mentioned to you when I first met you, I love the way you think. I love the way you process information, and how calm you are when people's feathers are ruffled, and how you kind of help to pull things together. And I thought perhaps there were some things that maybe I could offer that would be helpful to you. So I'm glad that they were. I'm really pleased about that. Anything else you'd like to share about this, Elizabeth?
Yeah, there are a couple of things. I'd like to give you an example of how I have used the roadmap. When I'm personally engaged with others, I do a self-check about how I'm feeling regarding our interaction, particularly when we're at different philosophical crossroads. I practice going internal to see how I'm feeling rather than focus on why their opinion is wrong. This frees me up to separate between them and me and accept both of us for who we are and where we are differently. Professionally, I'm starting a new career, being an artist and selling online. I let the anxiety and fear of bean counting my potential success and failure get in my way of moving forward. With this roadmap, the emotional intelligence tools I now have, I'm able to tap into fundamental, lifelong fears and deal with them in helpful ways. Finally, I have built art product, and started building a web presence. Beta phase for me right now. And I also look at this from the larger community, the other individuals and organizations. And I have to say, with the help of the Emotional Intelligence Roadmap, accepting the uncomplicated feelings, starting with how I want to feel, and then following the map is key. And I start with, right now, I am enough. Perhaps shifting the focus from consuming to being. Perhaps by connecting to innermost feelings about who am I, how can I fit in with organizations and my community so together we are enough. Enough to be happy with ourselves and each other. Enough to determine and participate in our greater good, moving away from the me first condition. For me, finding feelings through the Emotional Intelligence Roadmap is an empowering piece of the layered puzzle of life.
Wow, that's great. Thank you so much for that. Well, this has been great, everybody. I want to say thank you to all of you for participating in this. And I hope, as I mentioned to you before we started recording, my goal is that it inspires others to learn as much as you can about your own emotions, how you might impact the emotions of others in a positive way, and how to make a meaningful, positive difference for all those you care about, all those you interact with, all those that you may not like, but you have to interact with. You know, wherever it is, I think it's useful to think about, how are you feeling? How do you want to feel? What is a possible strategy for getting from what you're feeling to what's ideal to feel for you and for others that are important to you? And then what are you really able and willing to do? And then doing it and trying it. And sometimes our plans work beautifully, like some of the stories you've told. Sometimes you've got to modify them. Sometimes they don't work at all. But you go into these episodes, these situations, with more confidence. In my radio show, I like to think that when people call up and they're feeling helpless, that by the end of the conversation, they're feeling hopeful. And I hope that your stories have helped to make that happen. So thank you very much. And I appreciate it. And we'll close there. Thank you all.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.